Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves a track from an act named DECRYPTER titled Until the Dark Unites Us Again. And if we switch over to here we have ourselves a track on the screen on YouTube. Apparently this is off of the new album Chronicles, which is out now as of when was that? As of November 30th, we're got 2025. We're going to listen through this track from start to finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go. What do we got? Filthy guitars. Tricked by Humbersaw. Fantastic shift of place with the drums. It's nice to be able to appreciate the riff, you know. New chapter. The vocal technique is so visceral. It works so well within the genre. Adjustment to tremolo picking here just adds a new kind of sort of one. plague mask before. Great to see the bass articulating itself as well. Interesting. So that was a genuinely fascinating audiovisual experience there. I really like the music video. I thought it was very professional, and I quite like the song as well. But we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named DECRYPTER titled Until the Dark Unites Us Again. In this section, I'm going to be providing an overall sort of song analysis from vocals through to production, as well as any applicable constructive critique. And then finally, my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I didn't get all the words clearly. That isn't to say that the vocals were done poorly, because the vocals were done very well. We're going to get into that at the moment. The technique was fantastic, especially for the genre, but I think what I did get through is that they remember when they were alive, but they also are going to be without the pain and the suffering that they go through in their life. They're going to meet with each other in death. And it's interesting that we have the plague mask at the end, like the crow, the black mask. It kind of makes me think that maybe it's a cult of like the suffering and kind of ending up together in the afterlife or something like that. I could be completely misconstruing it, but that's kind of what I got on a first listen basis. And I figure that, like, especially if I'm not focusing on everything within a second time listen, I probably get more context. But it's a really interesting story regardless, very kind of macabre. And I think that it's just, it's great to have something a little bit different. So hopefully I'm not too far off on that front. The vocals in this track are tremendous. The guy has phenomenal vocal technique. It's very, very accomplished with that fry and the growls there. And I understand that's kind of some people think that's a very easy thing to do, and it categorically is not. It's very difficult to be able to both, voice yourself like that with the kind of aggressive kind of throatiness to it, that kind of noise, that fissure that's going on there. But it's also difficult to be able to do it in a way that is sustainable, that you can maintain, because it's incredibly difficult on your vocal instrument there, your chords, especially with improper technique. And what I can hear there is it's authoritative and there's a lot of power behind it. It's just genuinely well propelled there. There is projection, and I just think it's so good to hear someone who can do this technique properly, and that also kind of elicits again the aggression, the kind of the harsh nature of the subject matter, as well as talking in a way or communicating in a way that makes sense for both the genre as well as the individual instruments around it. So I thought that the vocals matched the expression or kind of quote-unquote vibe of the story very well. They were very well connected. This track is 7 minutes 42, and it's quite long for a track. You know, usually you have this 2 to 4 minute sweet spot where if it's less than 2 minutes, you're kind of missing maybe some important context that could be explained if you had just a little bit more time to sort of, you know, expand on it. And then if it's over 4 minutes, then you're kind of, you need to really make sure you've got enough variety within the piece in order to keep people interested in the sort of core ideas behind it. The reason I mentioned at one point, I think it was a third of the way through, there was a different chapter, is because this is part of why long form tracks work so well. If they had specifically had the same kind of drum loop, that kind of feedback loop of the halftime going into, like the chugs going into the blast beats for like 5 times in a row, it would have been less interesting every single time. But they switched things up in that middle part then for a more sort of melodic kind of feeling of things there. We had various sort of like solo sections as well as verses and choruses, and it was just really intriguing throughout. And I never thought at any point that there was any filler. It was just very well fleshed out across the board. We had a similar level of intensity across a lot of it, but there are subtle sort of variations and shit. Well, not necessarily subtle, but there are variations compositionally that kept it interesting. From the moment that you have that kind of gritty, distorted guitar on one side of the stereo field, at the very beginning there, the kind of harshness of the minor and Phrygian orients there, you know you're in for a hell of a time, especially when you consider the cinematography and the color grading on that. And the fact that we're very comfortable having that for just 15 seconds is really impressive there, because we're aware of the power of the riff there, that we're not trying to overcomplicate a theme too soon. Working the double kick of the drum kit in, with, by the way, just to talk about the drums for the moment, they were phenomenal. They explored the kit really well. Very proficient with their double kicks. You know, that they were metronome-like in their approach to the performance in general. They're incredibly tight to the meter. And we explored our main sort of quarters, eighths, triplets, and sixteenths really neatly. And again, we measured like half and sort of like normal and double time parts just effortlessly. We went between them with ease there, but we also allowed enough room for the guitars and bass and vocals to do their thing as well, as being a great accompaniment to them. So just before we go any further, the drums are done incredibly well. I'm not just glazing, it's a very proficient performance. In contrast to the freneticism, the aggression, the speed, the ferocity of those drum parts, especially again with those blast beats, came in with the cymbals, the kicks, and the snares there. You had these guitarists playing some power chord elements where there's some with diminished, should I say, chromatic elements with the power chords there. And it was ferocious there. We weren't afraid to have the chug in there, to have the heaviness of those rhythm guitars and the mid-range come down to orbit to sort of coincide with those bass and drum parts. And when we did slow down and mix in some sort of triplets for a bit of extra kind of groove and spice to it, we had it just was nice to have that rhythmic unison between the different elements there to help things chug and accent. I think actually part of the beauty of the guitar parts is that they were never too complicated there. We were never trying to take away from the vocals or the drums too much. We're still showing how to voice ourselves on the guitar really neatly. Like we had these kind of gritty, these distorted arpeggiated parts there, which were very kind of like sinister sounding there. And it was a very kind of satisfying kind of loop that we had going in there in one of the riffs there, especially because you'd go lower in the down tune range, then it would just sound kind of vile and vitriolic. Especially when you have the guttural growls of the vocalist there kind of reinforcing things. It just sounded intense, and would allow some power chords just to kind of hang in the ether for a moment sometimes, just to sit there, especially if we contrasted rhythmically with a lot of the really kind of quick like drum parts there. We never were too in time for too long there. We played with the listener's expectation rhythmically as well as compositionally. When we went into that part in 2 minutes 30 where we had some kind of lower mid kind of upper mid kind of guitar parts there, we had an interesting kind of effect on them where they almost sounded like they were a little bit kind of wobbly or vinyl affected there. They kind of sounded a little bit out of tune. I don't know if that was deliberate or not, but if it was, I consider that a masterstroke because it kind of made it seem a little bit sort of like demented and uncomfortable, and I think that approach suits really neatly here. We're kind of modulating or sort of reinforcing or reimagining, I suppose, earlier themes that we had there in a way that differentiates from previous parts of the piece. And especially at that 2 minute 30 mark, we hadn't overstayed our welcome yet, so it was just a good time to do so. With some quiet little rides in the background there, kind of just to decorate a little bit, you know, before we went into the heaviness again. It was just great to have that bit of respite there. And like the air, the winds that I could hear around the 3 minute 30 mark as the guitarist really slowed down there with some of those quiet, like more kind of gentle passages there melodically. It was just very ominous, you know, especially after what we'd had so far. It was a great different chapter within the piece to split it up and make it more interesting. And even allowing some feedback like around the 4-minute mark there for a bit of anxiety there, and dramatic effect was sensible. Also the tremolo picking. The tremolo picking on the guitars was neat because it just built up the kind of tension there. It was kind of ferocious and kind of nagging at you a lot of the time, but in a way which the kind of call of the afterlife or something like that was kind of doing. So it was a really effective device, primarily because I think it worked well as to kind of fill in the need of maybe some of the double kick patterns that we had on the kit from prior. And actually, I think the drums slowed down at that part there. So it's almost like the drums were aware that the guitars were going more quickly, so they allowed them that room to breathe, and there was a trade-off on chemistry there. And when we get into that solo section around the 5-minute 45 mark, we escalate it and we fly into the sky there. And we've still got a similar approach to tremolo picking, but that sort of like higher part of the frequency spectrum of the fretboard there, you've just got so much room to breathe. The entire track lifts up with that, especially when the bass player kind of explores a little bit at that point and goes outside of the root notes and just has a bit of a nice time as either a call and response or more of an active element within the performance. In fact, to be fair to the bass player, they do some work throughout it. It's just not all the time, but they know when they've got room to breathe. And as we go through the piece and kind of come to a close there, I'm just reminded of some of the other riffs that we had in different parts of the track, and it just leaves you in a position where you feel like you've explored the boundaries of the piece and the artistic vision they had there, whilst again not overstaying your welcome. Ultimately, a very tight, technically proficient performance there, with enough coloration throughout the piece there to not just be minors and Phrygians like flat seconds there. I think that we had a rhythm was a huge component of what made this track worth, but it was also, again, the furor of the vocals combined with the gritty nature of the distortion, the intensity of some of those breakdown elements, as well as just how it was a journey through our emotions, coming to terms with the afterlife and remembering we were alive there. I just think it's, as they put on the mask there, kind of remembering that. It's an interesting tale, and I just feel there'd be more that there's some stuff that I might have missed as I listened through this, but ultimately just a very satisfying track regardless without a note out of place. The studio recording, mixing and mastering is tight. I love the clarity of the vocals in the mix, especially with that kind of harshness to the vocal style there, great use of compression, slight reverbs, EQing, etc. The guitars double tracked and nice and heavy on the sides of the stereo field there. The bass and drums really wonderfully sort of managed as well, surrounding you in the stereo field, different toms and cymbals and stuff like that. There's no weird resonances in the frequency spectrum either. The music is nice and loud in the headphones. There is dynamic range to it from a compositional perspective, because I can tell that it's well glued and it's not trying to sort of be not too much headroom there, just enough to keep it heavy whilst also not being too choked. But it is nice and loud with that pumping to the bus compression and limiting is handled. Ultimately, I've gotten a real sort of applicable constructive critique for this band. They've just, with this track, it's a phenomenal first impression. They're very comfortable across the sort of longer form factor. From a general listener's perspective, I kind of feel like I'm missing certain elements after listening through it the first time, and I'm incentivized to listen to it more because of that. I had a good enough time not knowing or understanding everything that was involved for me to be curious to hear it again. I feel like it's a massive compliment to DECRYPTER. But also, I just like it when we follow the fundamentals of sort of metal, quote-unquote, composition and performance. We don't slack on our performance, and we can just clearly play our instruments and write great music. So ultimately, that sort of creates an aesthetic that makes sense with the lyrics. So thank you for watching my review of this track from an axe named DECRYPTER, titled Until the Dark Unites Us Again. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via the various social medias and YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.